In many ways, the job of raising awareness and inspiring action is a visual one. There's deep power in seeing a person's life experience on the page or screen. So let's begin today with a snapshot from It's Not Over. It's a new documentary from Andrew Jenks Entertainment that follows 3 young people as they come to terms with their HIV-positive diagnosis.
This is a movie about a topic that many have called stale and boring, a topic that experts say has a serious PR problem. It is a movie told through the lens of my generation, a generation that many have considered self-oriented, fame-driven, and lazy. Meet 3 young people that are all impacted by HIV and prepared to make sure that this deadly virus is eradicated from our world. Welcome to my journey for the past year, traveling to South Africa, India, and America. Paige, born with HIV, is a social entrepreneur.
The hardest part of living with HIV, it's not the health aspect of it. I think it's the stigma that goes along with it.
We set off with her 2 best friends and college roommates on a road trip across Middle America to surprise her boyfriend. Sarang, who contracted HIV from an unknown partner, is forced to not only battle the virus, but also his own sexuality during a time when being gay has been declared illegal in India.
That's where I made the mistake of my life.
And how long were you on medication for?
No, I never had a medication.
You never taken medication?
I never taken the medication.
And then there's Lucky, who lives in a township where nobody knows exactly how many have HIV. It could be over half the population. It's not really talked about. You can't tell until they start dying.
I found if I HIV positive, I think it's working. I will eat these things till I die.
I think there's some help, and it gets acknowledged and makes people feel good. But it's not nearly enough.
Activist Paige Rawl, who you just saw in that clip, has been busy these days. She's studying molecular biology at Ball State University in her home state of Indiana, and she's been an advocate for an anti-bullying bill in that state. And her story of confronting HIV/AIDS diagnosis in middle school is the subject of her book, Memoir. Her book, Positive, a Memoir. Positive is the Today Show's book club pick for this month, and I'm delighted that Paige is here today to talk with Today Show contributing correspondent Jenna Hager.
Everybody up. Seems like a little sleepy crowd. I hope people had their coffee. And there's 4 chairs for just the 2 of us, but we kind of like that. Thank you so much to the Atlantic and the AIDS Fund, which the MAC AIDS Fund, which I always thought was the MAC AIDS Foundation, but Paige knows everything, and back there she said, no, of course not, it's the fund. I'm so thrilled that you get to hear from Paige. As you heard mentioned, Paige's book, Positive, was the first time the Today Show has ever highlighted a young adult book, and her book is really powerful. We were so struck by Paige's courage and resilience that we just had to profile her. And so, Paige, what has the reaction been since you published your book?
I've received nothing but positive responses. I always use that word, and I'm like, do I sound weird? But I've received like amazing responses, and I think my favorite has just been from hearing from other people who are positive or other teens that have been bullied, and they say they've read my book and it's given them courage to speak out themselves or do something about the fact that they've been bullied or help someone else in their life that's struggling with a chronic illness. And so hearing those responses and hearing that my book has not only, inspired them themselves, but inspired them to help other people. And so, that was my whole point. And I've always told everyone that if my book could change just one life, save just one life, then everything I went through would be worth it. So to see that it's helped more than just one person, it's absolutely amazing, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. In 2006, I see a colleague from UNICEF here that I didn't even know lived in the United States. But I worked with UNICEF to write a book about a young woman living with HIV. And when I met Paige, I said to her, your stories were so similar. And the main thing that was so similar is that they really both have used their personal narratives to make a difference and to end stigma. So how have you seen through documentaries, through your book, that personal narratives can make change?
I think that just telling your own personal story is definitely, it's a hard thing to do. I know writing my book, I was like, oh, this is going to be easy. And as I was writing it, I'd have to stop, I'd get emotional. I'd be like kind of reliving the moments. But then I would sit there and realize, and I'm like, okay, I'm upset. I was upset when all this was happening. I was like, this is why I need to do this, so no one else has to feel this way. And so, being able to share my story, I've known, sharing my story, there's someone else out there that's always going to be able to relate to something that you've been through. And so I think sharing your own story, it's not just going to help you get it out there. It's going to help other people that are dealing with it that don't necessarily have the courage yet to share their own story. So maybe they could take a little bit, from hearing other people's stories and how they've dealt with it. And so that's the way I've kind of looked at it. I'm like, I'm sharing my story, and hopefully someone that's going through something similar will see something that, they want to make a change, that they want to do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's hear a little bit about your story. It seems like you had a very idyllic childhood. Talk to me about your childhood and how you found out you were HIV positive.
So I was born HIV positive. My mother had contracted HIV from my father, and she found out when I was about 2.5 years old. And right before my 3rd birthday, she found out about my HIV status. And I lived my whole childhood. I knew I was taking medication. I didn't really know what for. I just, grew up. My mom never made it seem like it wasn't normal. I grew up, I was like, oh, this is, all my friends do this. They go to the doctor every 3 months. They're getting blood drawn. They're taking this medicine every day. My mom made me feel as normal as any other kid, that I never saw anything different. And there's nothing not normal about it. But, I found out when I was just in 5th grade, and she disclosed to me that I was positive, and as long as I took my medication, that I'd be okay. And even then, I still was clueless. I knew, okay, I had HIV, take my medicine, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that there was that stigma out there. I didn't know that once I told somebody that they weren't going to think about HIV the way that my mom and I thought about HIV. So in 6th grade, I had a best friend, and I disclosed to her about my HIV status, and within just a couple of hours, I started being bullied because of it. I was told that my friends, I was going to share a drink with a friend, and they were like, don't drink after her, you're going to contract AIDS. And from that moment on, I knew, okay, my HIV status is now out here, and I know that there's going to be people out here that aren't going to accept me just because of it, even though, I was born with it. It was no fault of my own. And that's kind of when, I went through middle school being bullied almost every day, to the point where I had stress-induced seizures for 9 months. I had to leave my middle school in 8th grade. And after I left the middle school and I had to sit home and watch the kids that bullied me be able to live a normal life and go to school, and I was having to sit at home when I was so involved. So being home every day was not my ideal thing at all. And so from that moment, that's really when I realized, okay, I need to do something. It's not fair that I'm having to sit home. I don't want to have to see another kid have to be put down because of an illness they have, or because of something they don't have or do have, or whatever it may be. And that's kind of when I made it my mission to be out there educating and advocating against bullying, to show other kids and teens, if you're being bullied, it's wrong. You need to do something. You need to tell someone, it's not okay to be bullied for any reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your life seemed to implode around you. Will you talk a little bit more about what were the specific things that kids said, and also adults? I mean, you didn't feel safe in a school that had protected you up to that point.
So in my middle school, I had gone to the school counselor numerous times. I had told her about these incidents, and she was someone, an adult that I felt like I should have been able to look up to for advice. I should have been able to go to and find some sort of support, and that's not really what I received. She told me that I could deny I was HIV positive, and the school principal and my counselor eventually told me that I was causing drama because I was reporting these incidents. And so after a while, I just kind of stopped reporting them because nothing was being done. I felt like I was the one about to get in trouble for reporting these incidents, not the kids that were bullying me. And it wasn't up until my 8th grade year, I thought, this is my last year in middle school. I can make it through this year. I'll be in high school. It's a different school, new teachers, new administration. And I tried out for the soccer team, made the soccer team. On my first away game, my soccer coach approached me and said, "By the way, I heard that you have AIDS. Is that true?" I told her no because I'm HIV positive, and there is a difference between HIV and AIDS, and I just left it at that. And a couple days later, I had told my mom about this. She confronted the soccer coach, and the soccer coach went on to make a joke. She said that we could use my HIV status to our advantage, and the players in the other team would be afraid to touch me, and I could score goals. This was not only a soccer coach, but she was also an 8th grade English teacher. And so from that point on, my mom and I and my infectious disease doctor, we met with the school administration. We told them, I no longer felt safe there. I no longer felt like I was able to get the proper education just because I wasn't able to focus in class. I was going to school every day with a fear of when was the next time someone was going to say something to me. When was I going to see another note on my locker, my name written on the bathroom stall? And so, my mom and I, we met with the principal, and she told me, "I wish you could go here, but I can't promise to protect you." And it was at that point where that's the administrator's job. You're to go to school. They're there to protect you, to help you get an education. And that's not what I received. So that's when my mom and I decided the best scenario was for me to be homeschooled my 8th grade year. And, I went through homeschooling and wasn't my favorite thing. And, I was lucky enough. I found a high school that was supportive and was absolutely amazing. And, still to this day, they do events for me. They come out to my events and support me. So I was lucky enough that for high school, I found an amazing school that, wanted to tell people about my HIV status. They wanted to tell people that they had someone that was doing something different in the world. And so I think, I just wish everyone who's positive or has a chronic illness or whatever it may be was lucky enough to find a high school like I did or a school like I did. But I've learned, through everything that I've gone through, I feel like everything happens for a reason. And if I'm not out here speaking, then who else is going to do it? So that's the way I look at it.
Isn't she amazing? Let's clap. When you're surrounded with a group of activists, obviously with the Mac AIDS Fund and with others, so when you, first of all, obviously the stigma still exists after we've just listened to everything that she said. How do you think we can end it? How do you think, would you, A, feel like you'll live in a world where the AIDS stigma won't exist ever? And if so, how can people like you and the rest of the room help to contribute to a world where the stigma's gone?
So I feel like since HIV/AIDS has been out, we've come a long way, but we obviously still have a very long way to go. And I think it's just education in schools, I think, is one of the most important things. One of my favorite things is going into high schools and middle schools and educating the students and letting them know if you meet someone that's HIV positive, they're just like you. There's nothing different. They take medicine. They go to the doctor. Everything else is the same. And so just making sure to educate people and letting them know that HIV, it's no longer a death sentence. You can live a full, normal, healthy life being HIV positive. And so I think as of right now, the main key to helping reduce the stigma is just education, getting the word out there. I think a lot of people, I think the title of the documentary of the movie is perfect. It's not over because it's still there. It's not over. We have a lot of education and a lot of awareness to do.
Mm-hmm. I think we have a question somewhere right here, the brave first question.
Hi, I'm Gina Quattrochi with Bailey House. I'm also on the governor's task force to end AIDS, Governor Cuomo's. And one of the issues we're grappling with is pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, and how to deliver that to young people. And there's questions about, how young can someone be to receive PrEP without parental consent, a lot of debate. So what I wanted to ask you is, have you been hearing about PrEP and your travels, and what's your feeling about PrEP, pre-exposure, and what are you hearing from other young people, if anything?
I think that PrEP, I've heard a lot about it. I think that it's a great and amazing thing that we have it out here. And a lot, with young people, I'm finding when I speak to schools, they still are thinking it can't happen to them. I think that's what the main problem is and why it's education. I go into high schools, and they listen because I'm their age, and they're like, okay, this is someone our age, that she can relate to us. But then there's other kids that are just like, they're not paying attention. They're all on their phones. They're doing whatever because they're like, I don't fall under those certain categories of being someone who's HIV positive. And the thing is, you can't look at someone and tell that they're positive. And so I think it's just getting the kids to know that this is something that can happen to anyone. HIV doesn't discriminate is like the first step to getting them to know that there's PrEP out there now and that there's those options that you can live a normal, healthy life. You can prevent this from happening. And I think that's the number one thing is it's 100% preventable. And I think just getting teens especially to realize, okay, teen pregnancy is not the only scary thing out there. As I think what I'm hearing is that's the only thing everyone's scared of right now, and it's like that's not the worst thing that's out there. So just educating
possibly them. This movie could be a good resource, or the book too, for teaching, because sometimes it's easier when you hear the stories instead of the statistics. Do we have another? Seems like everybody's raising their hands all at the same time. This reminds me of my 6th grade class. Anybody else? Do we have a audience question? It says we have one. Oh, okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Bill Beitzer. I'm a photographer, and I'm an old-time member of ACT UP. And I just wanted to ask you what your opinion or what your knowledge is of ACT UP and what you think that group contributed to where we are now.
Do you know ACT UP?
No, can you maybe
tell us what ACT UP is?
Tell us what it is.
ACT UP was the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, and it was formed in 1988 by Larry Kramer, and it was a direct action group to bring attention to the AIDS crisis. And back then, it was a lot different than it is now. I'll just say like AIDS carrying faggots and stuff like that were things that were like reported, and they, let's say a couple things. Stopped trading on the stock market because they had a demonstration and things like that. But they were active probably for about 5 years, till 95, 96, very active.
What year were you born?
94.
Okay, so that's probably why.
that may be why. I was a baby.
That may be why. Another question here.
Thank you. C. Virginia Fields, National Black Leadership Commission on AIDS, also a member of the Governor's Task Force to End the AIDS Epidemic in New York State. As a young woman, my question in terms of dating and relationships, because working with women who are living with HIV, this is always a topic of concern and discussion. So I was just curious if you could speak to us how you address issues of dating and your social life.
So for me, I'm very open about my HIV status, and so I remember I was talking to Jenna about this, and I personally get my HIV status out there in the beginning when I meet a friend, when I meet a guy, whatever it is. That's one of the first things I actually tell them. And it's like, if they have a problem with it, then obviously I don't need them in my life. And that's the way I approach it. I know a lot of other people that I know that are HIV positive. They're not that open. They are not open to that idea of that being one of the first things to tell them because they probably barely know this person. And so a lot of people I know that are positive, that I've learned, especially I go to a camp called Camp Kendall for kids and teens who are infected or affected by HIV/AIDS. And we talk a lot about, when you're telling someone or you're telling someone that you're in a relationship with, maybe one of the first things, instead of just openly saying, I'm positive, bring up a story about HIV. Bring up something in the news. See how they react first about HIV in general. And then if they have a negative response, make sure, to educate them first, that they understand that you can't get this through casual contact. It's not a death sentence anymore. You can live a healthy life. And just maybe, just educate them first before you just blatantly tell them. Because I think, that was one of the things when I was young. I didn't understand what I was telling her when I told my best friend. And so it kind of exploded in my face. But so I think, just finding out first how someone feels about HIV and getting them educated is, I think one of the first steps to doing it. I'm very different than a lot of people. I get it out there in the beginning, and I know a lot of people that are positive do not do that. And so for me, it's different.
And you should watch the documentary as well because it deals a little bit with Paige's dating life. And that, all of these personal narratives could be good sources of education for the girls you work with. Another audience question?
Hi, my name is Jill May, and I work at Harlem Hospital with adolescents and young adults infected with HIV and AIDS, and most of them are perinatally infected. And I think that without activism, the stigma is going to remain. Our youth, however, are incredibly reluctant to disclose their status really to anybody and are not interested in activism. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on how to encourage them to get out there and get involved and maybe not be so afraid to disclose.
I think when it comes to disclosing your HIV status, I feel like lately I've talked about this a lot. It's a very personal decision. It's not something where you can just go tell someone and be perfectly fine with it. I think nowadays the stigma is still out there. And a lot of times, at Camp Kendall, we talk about when you decide to tell someone, it's not just going to affect you. You have to think of, we have, the circle that we have where you're in the middle. You have another circle of the people that know, your doctors, your close family members, and then it's kind of the outer circle, which is people that you would not think of telling at all. Maybe it's teachers, maybe it's just like a distant friend, distant family members. And with the circle, we talk about how disclosing someone, it doesn't just affect you. It also can affect your mom, your dad, your brother or sister. So once you tell someone and they go tell, they have an older sister that's the age of your older brother or sister or younger, then they tell them, then your brother or sister is going to then be exposed to other people knowing. So it's definitely a personal decision, and it's also, talking with the people that it's going to affect, because it's, I would like to say that, yeah, go tell anybody and you're not going to have, you're not going to have problems if you go tell someone. But the reality is, we're not at that point yet. So. And even reading Paige's book, I mean, it wasn't a complicated decision for you. Right. Because you told your very best friend, somebody that you trusted 100%. Right. So that's a hard, do you regret telling her that? I do not regret telling my best friend. I think, it's a sad situation what happened, but, I look at it now. If I wouldn't have told her, I don't know when I would have told someone. I think, I might have gotten older. My mom might have educated me more and told me, there's that stigma out there. And then I might have been afraid to tell someone. Mm-hmm. And so I think, it goes back to everything. I look at everything happens for a reason. If I hadn't told her, I wouldn't have been bullied. I wouldn't have gone through everything, and it wouldn't have made me want to speak out and educate people. And so, I don't regret it. I think it's never a decision that I would regret, because I would not be sitting here right now, and I love doing all of this. So I don't regret it. And I mean, it's a sad thing, but, it's brought me to a better place. We have one Twitter question. Look at that.
We have a question from our digital audience. She asks, it seems like kids more than adults are more likely to have negative reactions or views to the HIV conversation. What could we be doing in our schools to educate people at a young age? Just in schools, I've noticed even, when I was in middle school and even in high school, HIV, it's brought up in health class or science class, and, they only say really a few things. They tell you this is what HIV is. They basically classify it, it's an STD, but they don't talk about how there's also people born with it. There's people that are getting it other ways, and, I think just educating people more than just saying, this is HIV, it's bad, don't get it. I mean, that's the general when I'm going into middle schools and high schools, and I'm like, you guys, what does HIV stand for? Half of them have no idea. Half of them still think that you can contract HIV from saliva, from a toilet seat, and this is, we're in 2014. And it's crazy that, these kids, they're sitting there, afraid that I'm up there speaking to them like, oh my gosh, is she actually going to spit on someone on the front row? And it's like, no, you can't get it from saliva. You can't get it from those ways. And so just making sure that youth knows, it's not what it used to be. There's only 4 bodily fluids that you can contract HIV from. And I think, just making sure that they're actually educating them, not just bringing up the topic in school, is the most important thing, just because I'm just seeing that it's not full education. It's just... So it needs to be in the curriculum of schools. Yeah, it's definitely, especially since, around half of the new diagnoses are between the ages of, 13 to 24. And it's like those, that's my age. That's more than half of the kids I speak to are that age. And when I tell them that statistic, they freak out, because it's like, they're like, nobody our age should be getting it. And I'm like, I agree with you, but that's why you need to be educating on this, to know that it can happen to you. Mm-hmm. Do we have any other Twitter questions or one more audience? Yes.
Hi, my name is Ivy Turnbull, and I am the Deputy Executive Director for the AIDS Alliance for Women, Infants, Children, Youth, and Families in Washington, D.C. Paige, I have to say to you, I applaud you and appreciate all of the work that you're doing on behalf of youth across this country. One of the things I'd like to ask you, because we also deal with a lot of youth who were also perinatally infected, is how do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them engaged enough so that they will continue to educate and be advocates around this issue of HIV in adolescents?
I think just keeping the topic out there. I think a lot of people, it's not something that I feel like is discussed as much as it was before. Mainly, I think maybe because it's not as much of a threat that it used to be. And so I think just keeping the words HIV out there, letting people know it's something that we're still dealing with. Tons of people are still becoming infected with it every day. And, just I think for me, one of my main strengths of being involved has been Camp Kendall. I speak a lot about Camp Kendall. Sorry, it's like my second home. I love it. But, I go to that camp and, it was the first place I met other kids who were dealing with HIV, who were going to school, not able to tell their friends. They, were scared to tell their friends or even distant family members. And so that's kind of been my place of keeping involved. And I'm out here doing my book and the movie and everything, but besides that, talking to all of these campers that are also dealing with the same issues has kept them involved. We talk to each other on social media, we talk to each other through letters, through texting, whatever it is, and we have also speak out. So a lot of the kids, we go into schools across the country and we're telling people about our HIV status and letting kids know, we're normal kids, we're just like you, and we're positive. And, this has become an issue. You don't have to be afraid of it anymore. And just keeping the word out there. My book, the movie, it's a great thing. I think it's not boring. It's not like an old documentary that someone's going to get bored of. It's really funny. It's also serious. You'll laugh, you'll cry. It's great. I think it's like an amazing opportunity to get youth and make them see these are just normal people living their lives, and it just so happens that HIV is a small thing in their life.
Well, thank you guys so much. It was too short. When I read Paige's book, obviously it's entitled Positive because it's her HIV/AIDS status, but more than that, she lives her life every day and to be this amazing positive force that's making difference. So I know that after meeting her, I have no doubt that the future looks brighter. So thank y'all so much for having us, and thank you, Paige.
Thank you.
Okay.